Welcome, everyone. It is time for the next episode of Global Empires and Explorers. Welcome to this Global Review podcast. Today, we are going to get you ready for the quiz, and it's 30 minutes, so it's not going to take up the whole class period. So maybe do some homework after, I don't know. 30 minutes, 30 multiple choice with map questions, and there will be some document questions as well based on this. So we're going to try to do our best to prepare you for this. And how about we start with some study strategies? And first, we will go over some of the things we're going to be covering in this episode. Today, we're going to talk about the rise of the Mongols and the Yuan Dynasty, the rise of the Ottoman Empire, the Ming Dynasty, the development of nation-states and the exploration age, as well as the empires of the Aztec and the Inca, colonialism, and finally, slavery and the devastating impacts it had on Africa. All right, so that is what we have in the books for you today. So, let us start right now. And we will be starting with today map questions. Some of the things you're going to want to know are the oceans, where the oceans are, and some key points along the maps as well. I'm going to tell you about where those are, and also going to need to be able to locate some empires on the map as well. So, Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean, you're going to need to know where that is right around the area, pretty much under India. The Atlantic Ocean is, pretty much everyone should probably know where that is. The Pacific Ocean, Caribbean Sea, you're also going to need to look at, as well as Cape Horn, Hispaniola, which is an island in the Caribbean, Cuba, the Strait of Magellan, or the Line of Demarcation, the Treaty of Tordesillas, and how the Pope impacted colonization with his Treaty of Tordesillas, or formation of the Line of Demarcation. West Indies, you need to know where that is, as well as Brazil and the Cape of Good Hope. Some other places you're going to need to know in the East Indies. You need to know Java, Philippine Islands, as well as the Spice Islands, and Calicut. As you can also need to, the Cape of Good Hope is one of the most southern tips of Africa, where the Da Gama rounded to form a new route to the East Indies that was a little bit more successful than Christopher Columbus's was. So, yeah, also you're going to need to know the Iberian Peninsula, which is going to be Spain, Portugal, that kind of thing. And also going to need to know where the Ming, Ottoman, Aztec, and Incan empires are located. So also going to need to know the routes of the explorers, Columbus and Magellan, Diaz, Cabral, and Da Gama. So those are going to be some other good things to know. As well, as that does seem pretty good. So we're going to now move on to the Mongols, and we're going to take a look in depth about what's going on with them. And one of the big things about this unit is, as I'm sure you are aware, the shifting of power. And the power, if you had to find power, the ability to do what you want with little to no resistance. That's pretty much the definition of power there. Your performance and position of power, how you rule, and whether people are satisfied with your performance could be factors in the influencing the shift of power at that time. And what causes a region's power to wax or wane could be whether or not they're possibly threatened by some external or internal sources. There's going to be a lot of power shifting throughout this episode today. All right, so yeah, the Mongol Empire is one of the biggest, most vast, expansive empires, extending all the way from China and Beijing, extending through parts of Russia and all the way to Constantinople, and stretching into points of Eastern Europe or Northeastern Europe there. Really quite a stretch there. Some of the places conquered were Russia, Baghdad, Persia, and China. Some of the places that escaped that area were India, France, Italy, Egypt, and Japan. Japan was another big one of how that all turned out. So, yeah, their home was the Mongolian steppes with wide and open grassland. They were originally nomadic herders who lived in portable huts called yurts. There was a highly effective low technology. It was pretty much the story of the high-tech, low-tech. Was pretty much the story behind Mongolians. Their tribal technology was similar to that of steppe nomads, but their weapons, The weapons their blacksmiths made on portable anvils and forges were relatively crude, and the Mongols also acquired by plunder, tribute, and trade high-quality weapons made by urban artisans. The bow was the Mongols' probably their most important weapon. It had a pull of up to 160 pounds and a range of up to 350 yards. And they could put that arrow with poison. They could make flaming arrows or whatever. Really quite some stuff. Something that could ignite a fire. It's pretty much like dropping a grenade in there. That would be really quite cool. So a stone thumb ring used in the release further increased the speed and penetrating power of arrows, which were made for different purposes. They were short and long-range arrows, singing arrows, which were used for singling, fire starting, stuff like that. That was very, very effective. So, yeah, one of the major reasons why they were so successful was Genghis Khan, and he had the ability to unite the people around one common goal and vision. Genghis' use of spies and psychological warfare, and the fact that his army backed it up, also turned their spies into a really messed with the heads of the enemies and kind of created a psychological warfare factor that was quite effective. Some of the strategies they had were horses. They also kind of had a mock retreat where they would fake retreat and then come back and then really catch them by surprise. The Smarta lands and language, they used the Smarta laws and language of sucking up, and sucked up kind of all the knowledge from other lands around the area. They also settled down and established an empire via the Pax Mongolica, which is pretty much peace in the Mongolian Empire, which allowed passage of free trade and really a solid growth of the empire, which turned out to be incredibly effective for Genghis Khan, and that really turned out to be quite beneficial in the end for them, and that is kind of how the Mongolian Empire played out. But here's the important thing we did not discuss yet: the shift of power in the region, which is always very important to discuss. Before the Mongols came to power, it was the China, Tang, Song emperors and Persia. They had the power, but after the Mongols and Genghis Khan's devastation, they firmly had the power in the Asia, Europe, Middle Eastern world there. So that is very cool stuff. So now we turn to the Ottoman Empire, very big stuff. So they were one of the first main gunpowder empires. The importance of the new military technology has really prompted many scholars to label the 15th to 18th century the age of gunpowder empires. In the centuries prior to this period, Chinese armies under the Song Empire used fire arrows packed with gunpowder, but they saw little reason to expand the use of this new explosive. Early cannons were pretty inaccurate with noisy explosions. Could be used as very powerful intimidation tactics against the empires that they were, or the armies they were fighting against. So the Mongol armies overran China. The overran China found the gunpowder weapons effectively blasted openings in defensive walls and destroyed city gates, which was very helpful for access. With the adaptation of gunpowder empires needed far more financial resources than they needed to supply troops using swords and spears. The demand for new weapons required enormous investments in armories, sophisticated financing, and highly specialized labor. The states that could finance these investments tended to dominate things, but the states that couldn't, not so good for them. The people who invented gunpowder were the Song Chinese dynasty, and the Europeans learned about this technology through invading them, from being invaded by the Mongols with gunpowder. So pretty much how it went is China invented it, Mongols conquered them, and Mongols invaded Europe. So Europe's like, we better get behind this gunpowder thing. It's a pretty big deal. Middle-class merchants and bankers dramatically increased their power and prestige, in part because their ability to finance the latest weapons really was needed by a lot of empires. So right now the power was shifting big time, and it was shifting from the Mongols to the Ottomans. The Ottomans were an Arab people by the steppes on the Arabian Sea, and their important leader Osman Bey was a warlord And in fact, the name Ottoman in the Ottoman Empire was based from Osman's first name. The Ghazis were warriors of faith, and the Ghazis helped the Ottoman Empire expand to the west and not to the east or south, because prominent Muslim territories were in that direction. And one of the rules was that you did not fight other Muslims if you were a Muslim. So, yeah. They were known for their organization in the areas of taxation and record keeping, which was a pretty big deal. They took control of the Anatolian Plateau and the Byzantine Empire and established the seat of government in the city of Bursa. This was described as a pretty big event because they went from being nomadic to being settled, and were one of the last people to make that switch, but they did. One of the next main people was Muhammed the Conqueror. When Muhammed the Conqueror became Sultan, he strangled him to remove any competition of power, and one of the reasons why it was so difficult to capture Constantinople was because three of the sides were surrounded by water and incredibly thick walls. So he used gunpowder to crack these walls, Muhammad the Conqueror, and it was a big step in a big milestone for that empire to crack Constantinople. And it was the fact that he used gunpowder was a big step in the right direction and something that other empires use in the situation. Another big leader of the Ottoman Empire was Suleiman the Magnificent. When Suleiman became Sultan, he was very young and inexperienced, and in order to prove himself in the battlefield, he had to follow the tradition of his forebearers and expand the empire. He expanded it in two places called Belgrade and Rhodes. The Europeans feared Suleiman because of his use of dynamite. And this really hyped up his reputation because of the boom sticks. I guess you could say that really that put a fire under the bellies, quote unquote, of these people. Suleiman had lots of large monumental architecture projects built in the region. They demonstrated the wealth of the empire and the advancement of math and science. As the architects perfected the domed mosque, which is a pretty big deal. Such large, expensive projects were kind of symbols of the empire, and they were a pretty darn big deal, which was pretty cool. So that was one of the main big things. And the shift in power in this situation was the Byzantines to the Ottomans. That was the big shift in this little sector of the world at that period of time. So right now to our next big empire. So, and that one that we will be focusing on is the Yuan Dynasty and Marco Polo and his influence on that. Three places Marco Polo traveled in his big globe-trotting trip were Beijing, China, and Jerusalem. And one of the main areas where he traveled was Bangkok, Thailand, and he was a pretty big deal all throughout there, and it was really quite exciting. The things Marco Polo was able to discover and bring back to the European world about the crazy stuff that the empires of the East were doing. So what happened there was Kublai Khan. He was the leader of the China under Mongol rule. He became civilized and tolerant of other religion, and he was also one of the first Mongol empires that settled somewhere. He gathered information and mastered communication of his vast empire via little posts that were found along the main highways leading to cities where there were couriers on horses, spreading important information and communications. One of the main cities of Hangzhou in that empire had lakes, beautiful restaurants, and many palaces. And one of the things he wrote in this in his travels were the interesting culture that, just to put it lightly, that China had, and how different it was really from Europe. For example, Chinese begged foreigners to take matrons and actually lie with them, which is a little crazy. It may seem weird now. It's like, take my matron and lie with her. Very strange. Okay, so yeah, he had the Khan's personal credit card, which meant whoever hurt him would be attacked. So he was able to travel in comfort and safety in China. It was a big endorsement on the Khan's part, and in the Yuan Dynasty that really shows that there were some major